Welcome into another episode of The Install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. Buck Reising back here with you for another week. Greg, they've put together 5 in a row down here. Spectacular is probably the wrong way to put it, but certainly it was a dramatic performance for the Titans in Houston.
Dramatic?
Dramatic, for a couple of different reasons. Dramatic because, starting quarterback goes out, everybody's chest gets a little tight.
Right.
And Derrick Henry passing Eddie George on the all-time franchise touchdowns list, which was a little bit of a cool thing to see. And Derrick kind of round back into form the way he's been doing the last couple of weeks.
I know he'd probably like to play against the Texans every single week.
I think I would agree with that assessment. I think most teams would.
So, yeah, what was this? His 4th consecutive 200-yard rushing performance against the Texans.
Against them, yeah.
Yeah. So, no, it was look, I'm sure you've discussed on the radio. I'm sure it's being discussed on all the hosts are discussing Willis's performance. There's not a lot to say about it. They obviously decided that they could play this game without the quarterback being a factor in the game. And that was what they could do. So fortunately, they played a team in which they could do that.
Right.
It's
a rare enough opportunity for a team like that, but certainly something that they were able to cobble together. And obviously the defense is playing at a high level throughout the course of this stretch. But for Willis, Greg, it just basically looked like what we saw in the preseason. Like,
Look, Henry had the 41-yard run on the second play of the game. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the play after that, which is obviously the 3rd play of the game, was a sack by Hughes. Okay, that was totally on Willis. It was bang play action off a power run look with all 3 linebackers hitting the run action hard. The clean passing window couldn't have been cleaner for Willis on the inbreaker to Westbrook Ahini. Only he could tell you why he didn't throw it. I can't tell you that. And as soon as I saw that play, I was thinking to myself, okay, they're not likely to give him many passing opportunities in this game.
Yeah, nor did they. 10 total attempts at this point, and like you said, it was good enough to win. What they're doing though up front though, Greg, and they're playing the way that we know the Titans want to play anyway. But with Derrick getting that kind of volume in back-to-back weeks, it looked a lot less arduous than what we talked about 30 attempts against the Colts, where it's just grinding hard yards, and him able to make a couple of plays and not quite break one loose, but that 41-yarder, it started to feel a little bit more like what Derrick Henry normally feels like.
Yeah, and look, they did not play against a very good run defense, so they were able to control the ball and the game running the football. I think they also felt it is the NFL, so you never say, hey, this is going to happen for sure, but you always have a game plan based on study and what has happened previously. And my guess is they felt with their defense, meaning the Titans defense, that the Texans were not likely to put up 25, 28, 30 points, so that they could play the game this way and control it. Now doing that means you don't want to turn it over. You can't have any special teams mistakes. And that was the case. I mean, they knew they did not have to throw it very much, and they could. And once Henry had the 41-yard run on the second play, they probably got a sense that, hey, this could be a good rushing performance for us, and we can control the pace and tempo of the game. We can certainly out-physical them on that side of the ball, and all that we need to have happen is our quarterback not turn it over, not make a reckless bad mistake, and we can just stay with what we want to do. And it's not likely their offense, meaning the Texans' offense, would put up enough points to win the game.
Yeah, he had the one interception thrown well behind the intended target, and then they did have a special teams fumble from Robert Woods, but we're still able to survive it.
Right. And the interception was a classic case as well. We mentioned that play where he got sacked on the 3rd play of the game. That came out. He threw to Hollister on the inbreaker, but he left the ball far behind him. It was an easy pick. And again, when you're trying to develop a quarterback, Willis threw that without a firm base. He was off balance for no reason, really, and with a low arm angle. So, you're dealing with trying to get a young quarterback to play with some kind of fundamental mechanical technique so that he can be more precise with his ball location. Because, we get caught up in the fact that there are certain quarterbacks, one of whom they're playing this weekend, in Patrick Mahomes, but we get caught up in the highlights that it's really cool to throw off platform. It's really cool to throw, off balance. You don't need to be on balance to throw the football. Are there some quarterbacks that can do that? Mahomes, Josh Allen, but Tom Brady could never do that, and I think
Right.
he's been pretty good in his career. Drew Brees could not do that, and he was pretty good in his career. So, the goal is fundamental technique, repetitive mechanics, so that the precise ball location ideally follows.
Yeah, and certainly they'll need some semblance of a passing game this week in Kansas City, and they will not be able to run the football the way that they did on the Texans against this Chiefs defense, who's playing at a really high level, Greg. And we've talked about Steve Spagnuolo on this podcast plenty of times. Everybody in the league knows what he wants to do, but this unit seems to be really, really helping Kansas City further the margin of victory that they're able to put on some of these teams, because it's a really stout group so far this season.
Well, and they've got some really good players. See, the thing is, we all know about Chris Jones, but when they're in their base defense, there's a player who plays at the other tackle position named Derek Nottie, who's a really, really good run defender. And he's very much like the Grover Stewart in Indianapolis. Players you don't hear about, but they're really good at what they do. And when you play Tennessee, obviously you tend to play more in your base defense than your sub nickel or sub dime. So Derek Nottie is going to be on the field, and he's a really good run defender playing next to Chris Jones. And Nick Bolton, coming out of Missouri, you're familiar, I'm sure, being in the SEC, being in SEC country, he's become a really, really good football player.
Yeah.
So, this is not an easy defense to play against and to run against. The passing game is going to have to be a factor one way or the other. Now, that doesn't mean, assuming it's Tannehill, and we certainly hope it is, but assuming that it is, that doesn't mean he has to go 25 for 35 for 450. But they would not be able to win this game, in my view, based on the opponent, if Tannehill is 13 for 20 for 110 yards. Right. I don't think that would get it done in this game.
No, because even if they were able to get a lead the way that the Titans are built to kind of do, it's not something that no deficit is too great for the Chiefs to be able to come back at any given point with what they have. What did you make of the addition of Kadarius Toney that they made before the trade deadline, Greg?
Normally trades like that are made because the coaching staff and the personnel people at the team that traded for him liked him coming out, liked that player coming out, and just didn't have an opportunity to draft him. And they see that player being very functional and more within the context of their system. And I think Kadarius Toney absolutely fits their system. Now, he's not ready to play yet, so I don't believe we'll be seeing him this weekend, but he's a player that can line up inside, outside. He can line up in the backfield. You can use him on jet sweeps. You can use him on orbit reverse action. He fits what the Chiefs like to do. He obviously has been hurt in his first 2 years in the league. Beyond that, I don't know. I don't deal with the character stuff or anything like that, but he just hasn't been able to get on the field. He got on the field, I think, for a game or two as a rookie with the Giants last year, and he showed electric traits. He does have those kinds of traits. So it makes sense for the Chiefs because theoretically they don't need him right now, but he certainly fits their scheme.
No, it's not something that they don't seem in need of much right now with the way that Patrick Mahomes is playing. And we touched on this a little bit last week, Greg, obviously. The discipline and the fundamental technique that Mahomes is really, really consistently bringing to the table on a week in, week out basis, beyond the crazy off-platform throws that make highlight reels and, get everybody excited.
Right. Well, we mentioned it briefly last week, but I thought that Mahomes in his last game, because they're coming off a bye, I thought Mahomes against the Niners played just at a really, really high level. I mean, he's a great player, and I thought that game was just really high level Mahomes. I mean, just tremendous efficiency in the pocket. He really didn't have to leave the pocket very much against the Niners in that game. So he played from the pocket with timing, with rhythm, threw the ball exceptionally well, precise ball location. I thought he was just absolutely outstanding, and he's capable of that any given week. He's also capable of, as a coach told me, the trick shot throws. So He can do it all. And if he's sharp, that's a tough offense to play against. Now, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, what the Titans defense did against the Texans is not relevant this week because the Texans played a lot out of base offensive personnel, and you're not going to get a lot of that from Kansas City. So they're going to be in their nickel and their dime quite a bit. I guess my question to you would be, Hooker, what's the status there? Do we know?
No practice today. And I don't anticipate, because they downgraded him from questionable to out fairly quickly once they made the determination in that game.
Yeah, so he's a really important player in this game. Now, I'm not saying that, hey, that means they shouldn't show up if he can't play, but he's a very good player, and they've been using him. I mean, essentially, they've been playing big nickel. Now, is Molden going to be back for this week?
He is expected to be back. They designated him to return today.
Right.
And he's been dealing with a groin injury, but they do feel optimistic.
Because if he plays, he could easily become their slot corner this week.
Right.
Which is obviously his role when he's healthy. Because they're gonna be playing in their nickel and their dime quite a bit in this game. Unlike they played the way they had to play last week against the Texans.
Yeah. So I assume this game made the matchup show, but I don't know because of the uncertainty of quarterback, Greg.
No, it made the show. In fact, we're doing it as a full segment game because, quite frankly, it could be the best in terms of records. It's the best matchup on the schedule.
Yeah, no, for sure. Sunday Night Football.
No, I'm doing the piece. Darius is doing a piece on Mahomes. There's only one possible piece you can do when you talk about the Titans offense, and I'm doing that, and that's Derrick Henry. So the quarterback, that becomes a discussion point, and ideally when we shoot the show Friday, we have a better sense of Tannehill. But even if we don't, we just leave it alone because, we don't like to get nailed. If they announce on Saturday he's starting, that's after we shoot the show. So we don't want to, we wouldn't go there. If it turns out that Tannehill does not practice again tomorrow, and word coming from guys like you and Jim Wyatt and Turan Davenport and seems pessimistic, we won't deal with that at all on the show.
Yeah, no, which makes, of course, the most sense. Greg, was there any sense that Malik's presence when they're running zone read type of stuff had a tangible impact on the effectiveness of their rushing attack?
Well, I think anytime the quarterback can run, it does. Yes, for sure, because you're dealing with unblocked defenders who have to react. And I think that's one reason why teams that have that guy at quarterback, their run games can be really efficient. The Eagles are like that with Jalen Hurts. There's an impact there for sure. But the other thing we should mention about this past game, and I'm curious to see going forward, is Hilliard. I think he's a pretty important player in their offense because they don't really have any explosiveness at wide receiver. And he has plus lateral quickness. He can reaccelerate. He's a pretty good runner. He's an excellent receiver who can both be offset in the backfield and detach from the formation, Buck. So, within the context of who they're putting out there now, I think he's kind of an important player.
Oh, no, he's an incredibly important player. I mean, it seems he is the guy that they can go to in those, critical third and long conversions when they just need somebody to make a play beyond what they're going to be able to get through the air. And he consistently is able to provide that. And he was great. I mean, again, they're playing the Texans, but he was able to contribute a lot on the ground in this past game as well.
I mean, keep one thing in mind, and it cannot happen against the Chiefs. They went 19 consecutive plays to start the second half without a called pass.
Yeah, no, I know, Greg. I was shocked to see them even attempt that third down pass once they got in the red zone. It was something else.
And the other thing, in researching, getting ready for this game and doing the tape study and the other study, Henry's had 166 carries. 141 of them have been when he's a single back, an I back.
Okay.
He's not really a shotgun back. He's an I back. And that's where he's at his best, generating speed and velocity as a downhill runner in both the zone and the gap scheme runs. So, that's what he is. And you want to give him some space to generate that velocity, because that, he's your classic example of a back that when it looks like it's not blocked well, all of a sudden he comes out the other side and you go, oh, he just got 8 yards.
How?
That's the key for backs. That's the key for a back in the NFL if you're going to have a foundation back. Foundation backs are not built on, oh, hey, every once in a while they can break a 40-yard run. They're built on the fact that they can turn 3-yard runs into 7-yard runs. That's like, for instance, that's the thing Najee Harris is having a hard time with in Pittsburgh, is he's not turning 3-yard runs into 7 or 8-yard runs. Henry is a master at that.
Yeah, and certainly was able to use that forward momentum, make a couple of guys miss, especially on that long touchdown run that he had in this game against the Texans. So we know
the second drive of the second half, they started with 10 consecutive runs by Henry and Hilliard. I mean, they'd probably like to be able to do that every week, but I don't think that will likely be the best way to play the Chiefs.
Greg, I think if they could get away with not throwing a pass in a game, I think they'd do it this year. I think they'd really think about it. They almost did.
I mean, look, Willis had 1 drop back in the second half. He had 15 dropbacks in the game, and 1 came in the second half, and it was on 3rd down.
Yeah, and the score ended up looking a lot closer than the game actually was, because they had that 71-yard touchdown drive the Texans did at the end. So we know that the Chiefs and the Titans will be on the NFL Matchup Show, which you can make sure to get on Disney or on ESPN Plus. Set your DVRs. You can catch it on ESPN on Saturday mornings and get yourself ready for another weekend of NFL football. The Bills and the Jets, I have to assume, is on the Matchup Show.
They're on the Matchup Show, yeah. Well, it was one of those games, we're trying to figure out what to do there, because the Bills obviously are a good team, maybe a great team, and they're going to be in the show relatively often now going down the stretch as we soon start the stretch. So we're trying to figure out what to do. I'm doing that game as well. And, we thought, okay, you can't really do the Jets offense. Could you do the Jets defense? Possibly. But then we finally said, you know what? We'll just do Josh Allen again this week and do some of their staple concepts, because the Jets play pretty much they're multiple with their defensive coverages. So any play you show against any kind of coverage, the Jets are likely to have played that coverage with a decent amount. They play kind of 4 or 5 different coverages that they play a pretty good percentage. So you're going to see that when you play the Jets.
Zach Wilson particularly struggled on the offensive side of the ball last week, Greg. And, obviously he's still kind of developing at this point in his career, but I wonder what you make of him within their offense and how much he is or isn't able to do at this point.
Yeah, it's easy to say he's not very good, and obviously he's reckless and undisciplined, and he makes some throws that are highly questionable from a decision-making perspective.
Right.
But I think overall, he needs to settle down as a pocket quarterback. He is much too reactive, Buck, to what he perceives as pressure, but is not really pressure by NFL standards. So he needs to develop a much better sense and feel in the pocket. He needs to develop some kind of pocket presence. Now, whether that can happen or not, that remains to be seen. Now, the Jets had a lot of concepts in their pass game to really try to help him. Basic things that are, that are all designed to define the reads and the throws for Wilson. And at times he even struggled with those. Just knowing where to go with the ball on basic reads that are in everybody's playbook. And then every once in a while, he shows a flash from the pocket where you say, wow, okay. But look, every young quarterback in this league has a varying degree of long way to go. Okay. Yeah. Every young quarterback, no one comes into the league as a finished product. Obviously, some can perform reasonably well right from the beginning, and others it takes time. Wilson has probably had, I don't know, maybe a year's worth of starts, somewhere around there. He's a quarterback that if he's to improve, it's going to take a little longer. And he just may be one of those guys. I'm certainly not ready after the number of games he's played to say he's terrible, he stinks, get him out of there. And I wouldn't talk like that anyway. But it's clear that he needs more time. Everything is still happening a little too fast for him.
Yeah, which is why I always, I always want to make sure that and this is not a problem we have around here, but I think in just general sports conversation, we have a tendency to overcorrect when we see anything that a quarterback does, because you're working in 1 week sample sizes, and that's what's going to fill your conversation until the next time you see these guys play. And with quarterbacks, it's so hard to make those kind of definitive determinations so early on in their career, like we're talking about with guys like Malik Willis on one end of the spectrum and a guy like Zach Wilson, who's got high-level traits and was drafted with a much higher pedigree, but still is working through some fundamental flaws in his own game right now.
Look, Trevor Lawrence is going through this as well.
Exactly.
And there were many people who thought Trevor Lawrence in college was as good a college quarterback as they'd ever seen. Now, I think the expectations were a little unrealistic given his traits and given some of the concerns that were evident on tape, but that's not the point. The point is in the general world out there of social media and football people, there was a sense that Trevor Lawrence was the second coming, which of course, as we've discussed many times, is not his fault that people see him that way, but he's going through that as well. He started the season pretty well. We talked about it. It looked like there was clear improvement. Now he's had some up and down erratic play over his last 3 or 4 starts. And, he's in a new system. He's almost starting from scratch. This stuff takes time. Unfortunately, fans don't want to hear about time. And that's just, it always works like that.
Yeah. And, the cycle goes on and on. But in the meantime, you can watch the NFL matchup show and listen to the install and all the other work that Greg's doing to make sure you kind of, what's Coach Mack say? Keep your powder dry just a little bit as far as the quarterbacks are concerned.
He knows, Coach Mack knows how all that works. It just does not happen overnight.
So, Greg, looking at the other games on the schedule, as you mentioned, Titans and Chiefs, probably one of the better ones. Is Vikings and Commanders on the show?
Yep. Darius is doing that game. I'm doing Dolphins at Bears because some of the numbers with Tua in that offense are really kind of mind-boggling. So
crazy.
We're going to take a look at Tua this week. They do some really defined things too. That's the thing. They're really good at. They use motion more than any team in the league. Play action. When you look at the numbers, when they use motion, and by motion I mean someone's actually moving at the snap. There's a difference between motion and a shift. A shift is when someone moves and then resets. Motion is when someone moves and they're moving as the ball is snapped. When they use motion, so someone moving when the ball is snapped, Tua's numbers are absolutely ridiculous. And again, he missed a few games, but when they use motion, he's completed 60 of 80. Think about that number. Think about that number. I mean, so he's completed 60 for 80 for 718 yards, which is almost 9 yards per attempt when there's motion, some form of motion. This past week against the Lions, in some form of motion, he was 15 for 16 for 172 yards.
It's insane. And who's getting the ball more often than not in that offense, Greg, and defenses thus far don't seem to have an answer for it.
For second level defenders, there's a lot to sort out. There's motion and run action. And very often the motion goes one way and the run action goes the other way. So a lot of times you'll see motion, and you know how when you see the second level defenders start to bump over in response to motion?
Yep.
So what'll happen is they'll do that, but then there'll be run action the other way. So all of a sudden, the second level defenders start to bump one way. They see run action because they have run responsibilities first, and they go, okay, now the other way. And then all of a sudden, Tua hits that back foot and the ball's out. There's just a lot to process and sort out in literally a second.
Which is what makes that offense so fun to watch, and I'm certain fun to study from your perspective.
And it creates, taking nothing away from Tua, because this is the job of a coach, it creates a lot of easy throws. A lot of those throws are just pitch and catch throws right in the middle of the field. There are no defenders there. So like I said, no knock on Tua, because this is what you want,
Right.
This is coaching.
Well, and I think, again, kind of going back to the perception conversation versus what is reality for these guys, like his job is to execute the play call that's in front of him. And Mike McDaniel's job is to make, and the staff obviously, is to make sure that he is put in a position to where he can execute and maximize the ability of the rest of the players on the field. And it seems to really, really be tangible there. There's a lot of different scenarios where that's the case, but that seems to be one that I think people can clearly and obviously say, no, it doesn't have to be any strong indictment one way or any great overreaction about Tua. It's just what it is.
It's a statement of what their offense is. But people are going to say, "Oh, you're trying to rip Tua." No. These are the throws that the offense is creating, and that's what you want. You want defined, by NFL standards, easy looks. That's what they're getting.
Yeah, that's it's a foreign concept down here sometimes, Greg, but certainly something that's fun to watch with some other NFL teams. I'm looking forward to this game. I always enjoy going to Arrowhead. That place is rocking for.
I know I was there once for a game years ago, and it's like a college environment.
It's as close as it gets, certainly, and we'll
Are
see
you going
what
to be
kind
able to
of.
watch the Vols and Georgia this weekend?
Oh yeah, no, I scheduled my flight specifically so I can sit in an
that.
airport bar and watch as much of that as much time as it takes.
When was the last time Tennessee was the #1 team in the nation?
1998, Greg. It's been a little while.
Well, good for them.
Yeah, it's I'm telling you what, it's like watching two different sports from Saturday to Sunday between the two teams.
That's a very interesting comment and probably true, but that's great. I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing that game.
No, it's going to be electric, and I know a lot of people involved in the NFL are going to be at that game or watching very, very closely. A lot of fun prospects in that one.
Yeah, it's a shame for the kid from Georgia, Nolan Smith, who's out for the year.
The linebacker, yeah, that's a tough loss for that defense.
Yeah, I mean, they probably just plug in another 5-star, but the point is, he was a relatively big time prospect. I had watched his tape this summer, so it's a shame. You always like to see the best players playing games like that.
Yeah, no, certainly, and that's been the case for a lot of these teams that Tennessee have played. Fortunately for all of us who are getting the opportunity to watch the kind of season that they're having. But enjoy the weekend, Greg. Enjoy the football, and certainly we'll talk about it next week on the podcast.
All right, thanks, Buck. Appreciate it.